Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now, the Russian Direct Investment Fund has facilitated the return of American oil and gas companies to the Russian market following their previous exodus from the company. Now, this decision has been met with a mixed response, with some companies who left Russia with the hostility, while others have been reluctant to actually exit. They haven't actually gone away. Notably, some companies chose not to leave the country, which may be indicative of newfound stability in the industry. Now, the question remains whether large international companies in the industry would be interested in returning to Russia and whether their country actually requires their participation at this time. Now, the Russian Direct Investment Fund, under the leadership of Kirill Dmitriev, has facilitated the return of American oil companies. So why? I mean, due to the events in the Ukraine, international concerns such as Exxon Mobil, BP, Shell, Equinor, Eni, and several smaller companies, including those operating in the oilfield services sector, exited the Russian market. Now, as Igor Yushkov, an analyst at the Russian Financial University and a member of the Russian National Energy Security Fund, recalls, the first joint ventures with Western companies fell apart back in 2014 when the US imposed sanctions after the Crimea decided to join the motherland. And the sanctions the US imposed prohibited Western companies from working on Russia's offshore fields with hard-to-recover oil reserves. They were also prohibited from financing equipment, etc. He also went on to outline the joint ventures between Russian and Western companies, highlighting Statoil, Eni, Shell and Total's involvement in developing offshore and hard-to-recover fields. Additionally, Yushkov noted that the proposed Arctic alliance between BP and Rosneft, which was later replaced by a deal with Exxon Mobil and Rosneft for the development of the Pobeda field in the Kara Sea, fell apart. And he also mentioned the planned joint venture between Lukoil and Total for the development of the Bazanov formation, which is a hard to develop gas fields. It's like fracking in the Midland field in Texas. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, SCOBRICSinsight.com, and further develop them. You can do this by making a small donation, which is done by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now. Plus, please like and subscribe. Also, keep the comments coming and like and share. Therefore, companies who want to resume their involvement in projects, a number of factors must align simultaneously. Primarily, the US must lift the sanctions that prohibit the development of the offshore fields and fields with hard-to-recover oil. That said, the Americans have actually never lifted sanctions in their history, but they can suspend or freeze some sanctions by issuing a general license exempting some particular projects from the sanctions. So it's actually more accurate to discuss the freezing or suspension rather than the lifting of sanctions. Secondly, according to the analyst, Western companies still need to either commit to investing billions of dollars over the next few years in highly complex projects like in the Bazanov formation and on the Arctic shelf, or develop their own technologies for the shale deposit development and adapt them to Russia's geological realities. That or potentially both. Now, there's always a risk that the next US president, or even the current one, could change his mind and reinstate sanctions and jeopardize any Western companies' investments if relationships with Russia do deteriorate. Consequently, the likelihood of investors to returning to complex oil production projects in Russia appears low. Shareholdings in Russian companies are Not all Western giants divested from Russian enterprises. A number of them have stayed. I mean, for instance, BP still retains a 19.7% stake in Rosneft, and Thales Eni continues to involved in the Blue Stream pipeline. I mean, do remember that BP was making a third of its profits from involvement with Rosneft. Plus, 5 European companies that contributed to the financing of Nord Stream have the option to recategorise this project on their balance sheets at any time. Now, BP's departure was pretty notable, but Rosneft's management continue to convey their greetings to BP shareholders, reminding them of their commitment, but never withdrawing from the company's capital. I mean, it's evident that BP is very reluctant to actually relinquish its stake, as it's unlikely that they'll ever be able to acquire such a prized asset again in the future. Plus the level of profit, as I mentioned, it makes. Now, it would be extremely challenging for Exxon Mobil and Shell to resume their involvement in the Sakhalin project, unless they opt to acquire their stake at the prevailing market terms, which I think is unlikely. I mean, Shell's stake in Sakhalin 2 has already been transferred to Gazprom, and Exxon Mobil's stake in Sakhalin 1 was acquired by Rosneft. Plus, Exxon Mobil may recount difficulties in getting approval from Russia, even if sanctions are lifted due to its behaviour during the exit from the project, where it blocked all production at the Sakhalin 1 when it withdrew its specialists and employees, and it took some time to actually resume the operations. In contrast, Shell had the option to maintain its shareholding and renew the contract for purchase of products of LNG, similar to those taken by the Japanese companies, but it decided not to pursue this option, which was a bit short-sighted. Now, in my opinion, the most viable option for Western companies for Russia is to return to the real market value of the assets that they had in Russia, along with the dividends that are accumulating in special accounts. I mean, they're not getting paid. I mean, for instance, Shell's share in Sakhalin 2 was assessed, Gazprom paid the market value of the money, and it was credited to a special account of Type C, which has effectively remained within the state and within the bank, but the money's still there should they decide to come back and sanctions are lifted, they'll get the money. However, the state will assess the negative impact of Shell on Russia, and the damage should be deducted from the value of the company's share in the project. Now, BP, which I said continues to be a 19.75% shareholder. Rosneft accumulates dividends in special account S, and there's something like $10 billion in that account now, so it will be a big windfall for BP shareholders at some point. Total, which has a 20% stake in Novatek and the Yamal LNG products, in the same position. It's going to have a windfall when the sanctions finally get lifted. Now, in the event of a ceasefire on terms favourable to Russia, Western companies could receive fair compensation for their shares in Russian companies and get all their dividends. Also, I think Western companies would not like to particularly return to all our projects. In the light of the recent confiscation of Russian oil and gas company assets in several countries like Germany, like the Czech Republic, etc., the hasty sale of those assets that were not confiscated. So it's pertinent to question the necessity of Western companies returning to work in Russia. Plus, the remaining assets remains uncertain. Additionally, claims are being made against Russian companies in various Western countries, and basically they're just getting fleeced. These are being satisfied by the local courts, who ride roughshod over property rights, as we've seen in London. Plus, there's been a transfer of some of the property of those companies on the territory of Russia to the property of other Russian companies by offset. I mean, according to Frolov, who's Deputy Director of the Institute of National Energy, the industry media infotech has led to a number of major issues. These companies that would like to come back to return to Russia, and Russian oil men will welcome them, which is basically the service companies. The oil service companies have had a long and good tradition back here, even back in the Soviet times. But majors like Exxon Mobil and Chevron are going to have very, very cautious because of potential changes in the US government policy, which is basically tightening its rhetoric towards the Russian Federation. I mean, Exxon Mobil has already incurred substantial losses due to the loss of its share in the Russian project, so it will obviously think twice before it comes back. So in my opinion, the most probable outcome is the return of the oil services companies in the event of the successful talks that have been taking place to resolve the conflict. Now, some of those, it's financially viable for the oil field service companies to continue operating in Russia because it's a good business. I mean, they have taken various measures to ensure, including transferring all their assets to local management, renaming some of the companies and getting into agreements on the possibility of buying back the assets at another time. Now, the big four oil service companies, only two of them actually left. That was Halliburton and Baker Hughes. The others, which were Weatherford and SLB, which was formerly Schlumberger, have maintained a presence in Russia and have made very, very good money from it. While Weatherford has reduced its participation by terminating some contracts, it's basically shows that Schlumberger, or SLB as it's now called, assumed most of those contracts and it's expanding its presence. It's actually one of the most profitable companies in Russia, which is advantageous given that their main competitors exited the market. So I'm confident that Halliburton and Baker Hughes will be looking to return, but the emphasis needs to lift the sanctions, or at least a suspension, and certainly those that prohibit the supply of energy equipment to Russia, and other restrictions that have hindered these companies' operations. Russia certainly needs the return of these oil services companies. This will lead to an increase in the profitability of Russian companies. Currently they're drilling multiple wells instead of one single more technologically advanced well, which would certainly help the demand. So while Russian companies excel in basic drilling and repairs operation, they really do depend on some of the technologies that Western service companies have specialised in the high-tech side. Consequently, the absence has led to increased costs in the Russian oil industry, and welcome the oil services companies would be there. However, there's no discussion about increasing production because that's not actually on the agenda due to the quotas set by OPEC+. So there's no particular challenges in that regard. So the lifting or suspension or whatever of American sanctions is pivotal, and experts have displayed a degree of optimism so far. However, it's also worth bearing in mind that excessive optimism, stating that sanctions would primarily affect those in the financial sector. So this is due to the fact that Trump is averse to the impact of sanctions on the use of dollars and its influence on the global oil and gas market and the sector. So if sanctions are ever lifted, they're likely to last to be unfrozen. In the gas sector, there's absolutely no chance of sanctions being lifted, as the United States is determined to double its LNG exports up to 2028. So it will be targeting everything it can to stop Russia being able to challenge them in their oil and gas supplies. I mean, certainly I would say that they be competitors to anything that's LNG, of Russian LNG against that. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and if you want to help me out, click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, and I'll see you all again soon.